Hi. My camera just went on automatically. I must have pushed the button when I'm setting it up, but it's great. I got a new book. Oh, my name is Dr. Cheryl Meyer, and I am reading us the book on Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. It's from 1910, so it's copyright free, and I came down to the ocean. The sunset just happened, so I was playing my guitar because I needed to practice. So if you want to go watch that video, I haven't posted it yet because I just made it, but it ought to be up. If I could hear it, I didn't check the sound yet. But anyway, it was, we are going to be friends. I can tell that we are going to be friends by the beach. I'm sure I'll put by the beach. Whoops. Okay, good. All right. I don't have to mess around with this anymore. I got a flashlight, but I left it in my car. And we're down closer to the ocean. That's okay. We'll improvise one more time. And the book just came from Germany. This is the 1914 version, so it's 100 years old. Over 100 years old. I think 4th edition. All right, so let me see where we are. We're on chapter... Mysticism is the study of spiritual consciousness. I'm going to take my necklaces off. Well, maybe just tuck them in so the mic doesn't keep hearing them. All right. Evelyn Underhill, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis both knew of her if they hadn't met her personally. I didn't look that up more. JRR Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. All right. Chapter 2. Oh, there's not a giant preface in this one, that's why, because we read the preface. So you can start here. All right. I'm just feeling if I threw the flashlight in, but I had 2 of them too. It's already too dark for me to... It looks brighter in the camera, but enjoy the ocean. You wanted us to be here? Hopefully. All right. Okay, so at the beginning of this book, Evelyn describes what's going to be in this book. So she says, I'm just going to go up to my car. Wait, let me figure out. All right, I'll try this for a while. Another philosophic scheme. Vitalism, the new philosophy. Dreich. Bergson, Eucken, the vital principle as the essence of reality. Freedom, spontaneity, Nietzsche, the inclusive character of vitalistic philosophy, physical, psychological, spiritual vitalism, and the mystics, Heraclitus, the father of the new philosophy, its other connections, its central idea, the world of becoming, reality as dynamic, life as incessant change, Bergson's theory of the intellect of perception, its relation to mysticism, reality known by communion, intuition, its partial nature, Rudolf Euchsen's teaching, a spiritual vitalism, reality as an independent spiritual world, man's possible attainment of it. He is the meeting point of various stages of reality, rebirth, denial of the sense world, Euchen's teaching and mysticism, mystics, the heroic example of independent spiritual life, vitalism criticized, its central idea, only half a truth, the mystic consciousness of reality twofold, being and becoming, transcendence and immanence, both true, St. Augustine on the nature of God, man's instinct for the absolute, mysticism justifies it, reconciles it with the dynamic universe, Boheme, revelation by strife, mystic union, its two forms, its agent, the absolute element in man, total mystic experience, only expressible in terms of personality. How is this experience attained? Oh, I'm so glad I stayed. I just got to look up. It's beautiful. So again, chapter 2 is mysticism and vitalism. So she just named all the subtopics that she'll go over. Oh yeah, you're still getting such a beautiful view. I'm gonna, all right, move a little bit down. All right. I hope you're having a beautiful day today, and this just added to it. There. That way I can look up a little bit every now and again. We glanced at the beginning of this inquiry at the universe which results from the various forms of credulity practiced by the materialist, the idealist, and the skeptic. We saw the mystic denying by word and act the validity of the foundation on which those universes are built, substituting his living experience for their conceptual schemes. But there is another and wholly distinct way of seeing reality, or more correctly, one aspect of reality, old as to its central idea, new as to its application of that idea. This scheme of things, this new system, method, or attitude possesses the merit of accepting and harmonizing many different forms of experience, even those supreme experiences and intuitions peculiar to the mystics. It is the first great contribution of the 20th century to the history of man's quest of reality, a true, quote, child of its time. It is everywhere in the air. Many who hardly know its name have been affected by its spirit and by the vague luminous shadow which is always cast before a coming system of thought. Almost insensibly, it has already penetrated and modified our attitude, not only to philosophy, but to religion, science, art, and practical life. All right, I forgot to say that if you're watching this, if I post these at all on Instagram, then it runs out at 15 minutes, so you can watch the rest on my YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe there and put the notification bells on and all of that, so you'll know when these are posted. And go start at the playlist, but feel free to start here, it's fine, because all these subtopics need to be covered. Almost insensibly, it has already penetrated and modified our attitude, not only to philosophy, but to religion, science, art, and practical life. Like the breath of spring, impossible to grasp and difficult to define, it is instinct with fresh life and fertilizes where it goes. Fertilizes where it goes. It has come upon us from different directions, already possesses representatives on each of the three great planes of thought. Dreisch, D-R-I-E-S-C-H, and other biologists have applied it in the sphere of organic life. Bergson, starting from psychology, has taken its intellectual and metaphysical aspects in hand, and Rudolf Eucken, E-U-C-K-E-N, has developed form, or beside it, a living philosophy of the spirit, of man's relations to the real. Just when people are coming in. Oh, the light just went on. The nearest approach, perhaps, which any modern thinker has made to a constructive mysticism. Hi. Okay, so Rudolf Eucken has developed form from, or beside it, a living philosophy of the spirit, of man's relations to the real, the nearest approach, perhaps, which any modern thinker has made to a constructive mysticism. At the bottom of these three very different philosophies, the same principle may be discerned. The principle, that is to say, of vitalism, of a free, spontaneous, and creative life as the very essence of the real. Not law, but aliveness, incalculable and indomitable. Indomitable is their motto. Not human logic, but actual living experience is their text. The vitalists, whether the sphere of their exploration be biology, psychology, or ethics, see the whole cosmos, the physical and spiritual worlds, as instinct with initiative and spontaneity, as above all things free. For them, nature is on the dance. And that's in quotes, on the dance. One cannot calculate her acts by the nice processes of dialectic. Though she be conditioned by the matter with which she works, her freedom is stronger than her chains. Pushing out from within, seeking expression, she buds and breaks forth into original creation. The iron laws of determinists are merely her habits, not her fetters, and man, in seeing nature in the terms of cause and effect, has been the dupe of his own limitations and prejudices. Bergson, Nietzsche, Eucken, though they differ in their opinion as to life's meaning, are alike in this vision, in the stress which they lay on the supreme importance and value of life, the great cosmic life transcending and including our own. This is materialism inside out, for here what we call the universe is presented to us as an expression of life, not life. Let's see. Not life as an expression or byproduct of the universe. The strange, passionate philosophy of Nietzsche, that unbalanced John the Baptist of the modern world, is really built upon an intense belief in the supernal nature and value of life, action, and strength, and spoilt by the one-sided individualism which prevented him from holding a just balance between the great and significant life of the ego and the greater and more significant life of the all. Ego in this word sense back then was it's capital E in this. It was a different word for the word self. So maybe she's talking about self as higher self, but We'll find out. It's not egotism, I don't think. We'll see from the context. I don't know if I said I'm a psychologist for the last 20 plus years in my day job. Obviously, the peculiar merit of vitalistic philosophy lies in its ability to satisfy so many different thinkers, starting from such diverse points in our common experience. On the phenomenal side, it seems able to accept and transfigure the statements of physical science. In its metaphysical aspect, it leaves place for those ontological speculations which take their rise in psychology. It is friendly to those who demand an important place for moral and spiritual activity in the universe. Finally, though here we must be content with deduction rather than declaration, it leaves in the hands of the mystics that unique power of attaining to absolute reality, which they have always claimed, shows them as their true possessors, shows the mystics as the true possessors of freedom, the torchbearers of the race. Did it acknowledge its ancestors with the reverence which is their due, vitalism would identify itself with the great name of Heraclitus, the mystic philosopher. Oh, okay, there's a kid, so I'm going to point this towards me. Who in the 5th century BC introduced its central idea to the European world. It is, though this statement might annoy some of its interpreters, both a Hellenic and a Christian system of thought, and represents the reappearance of intuitions which have too long been kept in the hiddenness by the leaders of the race. So she's saying, even though this was 500 years before Christ, it introduced this central idea to the European world. It's both a Hellenic and Christian system of thought. So Saint Augustine, there's a quote somewhere that says, before Christianity came about, it's in his notes somewhere, before Christianity came about, it was here before we called it Christianity. Now that's a deep saying, so I don't know how to interpret that, but all right. They didn't come up. They were just standing there. Okay. A living theologian has said that as in hats, so in heresies, the very latest creation is generally a revival of forgotten fashions of the past. This law applies with peculiar force to systems of philosophy, which generally owe more to the judicious resuscitation. I can't see in the dark. I'm like, wait, I have to sit here. I forgot my flashlight. All right, the people walked by. Oh. It looks like the sun, but that's just... Okay, I'm back. I accidentally pushed the button again, just like this started. And I have my light now, my bell light. So we're close to the ocean, but not quite at the same place that we were. So I'll start back where we left off. It is friendly to those who demand an important place for morale and spiritual activity in the universe. I'm just going to start back a little bit. Obviously, the peculiar merit of the vitalistic philosophy lies in its ability to satisfy so many different thinkers, starting from such diverse points in our common experience. On the phenomenal side, it seems able to accept and transfigure the statements of physical science. In its metaphysical aspect, it leaves the place for those ontological speculations which take their rise in psychology. It is friendly to those who demand an important place for moral and spiritual activity in the universe. Finally, though here we must be content with deduction rather than declaration, it leaves in the hands of the mystics that unique power of attaining to absolute reality, which they have always claimed, shows them as the true possessors of freedom, the torchbearers of the race. That was worth repeating. Did it acknowledge its ancestors with that reverence which is their due? Vitalism would identify itself with the great name of Heraclitus, the mystic philosopher who, in the 6th century BC, introduced the central idea to the European world. It is, though the statement might annoy some of its interpreters, both a Hellenic and a Christian system of thought, as I was talking about, and represents the reappearance of intuitions which have too long been kept in the hiddenness by the leaders of the race. A living theologian, the race of mankind. That's all she's talking about. I think if you're here, you probably know that. You probably know far more than I do about this subject. But maybe, I don't know. I've had lots of experiences. Okay, a living theologian has said that as in hats, so in heresies, the very latest creation is generally a revival of forgotten fashions of the past. The law applies with peculiar force to systems of philosophy, which generally owe more to the judicious resuscitation of that which sleeps than to the birth of that which has been newly conceived. So basically with heresies, the same heresies have come over and over again throughout all time. And just like with hats, fashions in hats, Anyway, they're not new heresies or new philosophies. They're just old ones that have come, cycled back up. I have said that so far as it's ontologically is concerned, this new way of seeing the real goes back to Heraclitus, whose logos, or energizing fire, is but another symbol for that free and living spirit of becoming, that indwelling creative power which vitalism acknowledges as the very soul or immanent reality of things. I think that's where we were. This eternal and substantial truth the vitalists have picked up, retranslated into modern terms, and made available for modern men. In its view of the proper function of the intellect, it has some unexpected affinities with Aristotle, and after him with St. Thomas Aquinas, regarding it as a departmental affair. All right, I am at a completely different beach, and it's the next day from last night when I was doing the last video. That one was crazy, like how many interruptions we had. My phone kicked me off because it said it didn't have enough memory. So here we are, I cleaned it all up. Look at this. And I'll just get back to reading so that we can stop having interruptions. I have said so far, as its ontology is concerned, this new way of seeing the real goes back to Heraclitus, whose logos, or energizing fire, is but another symbol for that free and living spirit of becoming, that indwelling creative power which vitalism acknowledges. Thank you so much for your patience with this. Just volunteering my time. There we go. As the very soul or immanent reality of things. This eternal and substantial truth the vitalists have picked up, retranslated into modern terms, and made available for modern men. In its view of the proper function of the intellect. Oh, I don't mind at all. Am I in your way? No. Okay, good. No, it's fine. I know this. I'm trying to read this book, and it got interrupted twice last night, so I moved locations. Not from you guys, not from people. My phone was just like, no more memory. I'm like, no. Right?
Always works that way.
Have a good night. This eternal and substantial truth the vitalists have picked up, retranslated into modern terms, made available for modern men. In its view of the proper function of the intellect, it has some unexpected affinities with Aristotle and after him with St. Thomas Aquinas, regarding it as departmental affair, not with the Platonists as the organ of ultimate knowledge. Its theory of knowledge is close to that of the mystics, or would be, if those wide-eyed gazers on reality had interested themselves in any psychological theory. Let me just make sure. All right. Of their own experiences. A philosophy which can harmonize such diverse elements as these is likely to be useful in our present attempt towards an understanding of mysticism, for it clearly illustrates certain aspects of perceived reality which other systems ignore. It has the further recommendation of involving not a mere diagram of metaphysical possibilities, but a genuine theory of knowledge. That is to say, its scope includes psychology as well as philosophy. The consideration not only of the nature of reality, but also of the self's power of knowing it, the machinery of contact between the mind and the flux of things. Hence there is about it a wholeness, an inclusive quality, very different from the tidy ring-fenced systems of other schools of thought. It has no edges, and if it be true to itself, should have no negations. It is a vision, not a map. Now the primary difference between vitalism and the philosophies which we have already considered is this: its word of power. Its central idea is not being, but becoming. Translated into the language of Platonic theology, not the changeless one, the absolute, but his energizing thought, the Son, the creative logos, is at once the touchstone of truth, the end of knowledge, the supreme reality, which it proposes as accessible to human consciousness. All things, said Heraclitus, are in a state of flux. Everything happens through strife. Reality is a condition of unrest. Such is also the opinion of Bergson and his disciples, who, agreeing in this with the champions of physical science, look upon the real as dynamic rather than static, as becoming rather than being perfect, and invite us to see in time the procession or flux of things, the very stuff of reality. From the fixed lull of heaven, she saw time like a pulse shake fierce through all the worlds. I think I can just show you this because this is a 100-year-old book. It's right here. So it looks like a poem. I'm sure it is. Fragments from Heraclitus, I think. First edition canto, maybe. Said Rossetti of the Blessed Damozel. Bergson, seen from another standpoint, ignores, if he does not deny, the existence of the fixed lull and still eternity, the point of rest, and finds everywhere the pulse of time, the vast unending storm of life and love. Reality, says Bergson, is pure creative life, a definition which excludes those ideas of perfection and finality involved in the idealist concept of pure being as the absolute and unchanging one. She has those capitalized, pure being. So much brighter than what's showing there. There's more of the ocean. All right. As the absolute and unchanging one with a capital O. This life, as he sees it, is fed from within rather than upheld from without. It evolves by means of its own inherent and spontaneous creative power. The biologist nature, so careful of the type, the theologian's creator, external to his universe and holding all things in the hollow of his hand, these are gone, and in their place we have a universe teeming with free individuals, each self-creative, each evolving eternally, yet towards no term. The first feeling of the philosopher initiated into this system is that of the bewildered traveler who, quote, could not see the wood for the trees. The deep instinct of the human mind that there must be a unity, an orderly plan in the universe, that the strung along beads of experience do really form a rosary, though it be one which we cannot repeat, is here deliberately thwarted. Creation, activity, movement. This, says vitalism, rather than any merely apparent law and order, any wholeness is the essential quality of the real, is the real. And life is an eternal becoming, a ceaseless changefulness. Boldly adopting that hermetic principle of analogy, quod inferius sicut quod superius. She doesn't translate the Latin there. It says see below part 1, caption 7. I don't know if we'll ever get to that. Which occult and mystical thinkers have always loved. It invites us to see in that uninterrupted change, which is the condition of our normal consciousness, a true image, a microcosm of the living universe, as a part of which that consciousness has been evolved. Listen, if you guys speak Latin, I took Greek. If anyone speaks Latin, feel free to leave that. I'll put it right there in the comments for us. So that we can all know what it said. Inferius, superius. What is inferior? Something about superior. Maybe as above, so below, but I don't think so. But it has that feeling, I think. If we accept this theory, we must then impute to life, in its fullness, the huge, many-leveled, many-colored life, the innumerable worlds which escape the rhythm of our senses, not merely that patch of physical life which those senses perceive, a divinity, a greatness and splendor of destiny far beyond that which it is credited by those who hold to a physico-chemical theory, Physico, physico-chemical theory of the universe. We don't use that word very often anymore. We must perceive in it, as the mystics have done, the beating of the heart of God, and agree with Heraclitus that there is but one wisdom to understand the knowledge by which all things are steered through the all. Union with reality, apprehension of it, will then, upon this hypothesis, be union with life as its most intense point, in its most dynamic aspect. It will be a deliberate harmony set up with the logos, which that same far-seeing philosopher described as man's most constant companion. Ergo, says the mystic, union with a personal and conscious spiritual existence immanent in the world, one form, one half of the union, which I have always sought, since this is clearly life in its highest manifestation. Beauty, goodness, splendor, love, all those words of glamour which exhilarate the soul are but the man-made names of aspects or qualities picked out by human intuition as characteristic of this intense and eternal life with a capital L, in which is the life of men. How then may we know this life, this creative and original soul of things in which we are bathed, in which, as in a river swept along, not, says Bergson bluntly, by any intellectual means, the mind which thinks it knows reality, because it has made a diagram of reality, is merely the dupe of its own categories. The intellect is a specialized aspect of the self, a form of consciousness. That's my friend's dog. But specialized for very different purposes than those of metaphysical speculation. Life has evolved in it. Life has evolved it in the interest of life, has made it capable of dealing with solids, with concrete things. With these, it is at home. Outside of them, it becomes dazed, uncertain of itself. for it is no longer doing its natural work, which is to help life, not to know it. In the interest of experience, and in order to grasp perceptions, the intellect breaks up experience, which is in reality a continuous stream, an incessant process of change and response, with no separate parts, into purely conventional moments, periods, or psychic states. I remember, I'll just make a comment real quick, as my friend Elliot Smith was a musician, and we were talking one night. He's passed on now, but he was talking to me about the nature of time and how music is a kind of art where the artist travels along with you in time. I just remember the conversation. It goes like this. We break these up in moments, but it's really a continuous stream, a process with no separate parts. It picks out from the flow of reality those bits which are significant for human life, which, quote, interest it, catch its attention. From these it makes up a mechanical world in which it dwells, and which seems quite real until it is subjected to criticism. I was watching a video today, and she was quoting Wayne Dyer, who said, like, the reality you see will change. Once you change, it changes the reality outside of you. Something like that. My other friend is right in front of me doing a headstand. I won't put him on the camera, like with the splits, that's what I do that. And then my other friend is doing yoga and her dog is barking. It's just so weird that they were both out here tonight. Anyway, not that weird, because I met them both here. It does, says Bergson, in an apt and already celebrated simile, the work of a cinematograph, takes snapshots of something which is always moving, and by means of these successive static representations, I always say representing, because it's, anyway, none of which are real, because life, the object photographed, never was at rest. It recreates a picture of life, of motion. This picture, this rather jerky representation of divine harmony, from which innumerable moments are left out, is very useful for practical purposes, but is not reality because it is not alive. I wonder if she did this before we had, I think she did before we had video cameras, This, quote, real world, then, is the result of your selective activity, and the nature of your selection is largely outside your control. Your cinematograph machines go at a certain pace, takes its snapshots at certain intervals. Anything which goes too quickly for these intervals is either fails to catch or merges with the preceding and succeeding movements to form a picture with which it can deal. Thus, we trust, for instance, the storm of vibrations which we convert into sound and light. Slacken or accelerate its clock time, change its rhythmic activity, and at once you take a different series of snapshots and have, as a result, a different picture of the world. Thanks to the time at which the normal human machine is set, it registers for us what we call, in our simple way, the natural world. A slight accession of humility or common sense might teach us that a better title would be our natural world, not because there's lots more. Now let human consciousness change or transcend its rhythm, and any other aspect or any other world may be ours as a result. Hence, the mystics claim that in their ecstasies, they change the conditions of consciousness and apprehend a deeper reality which is unrelated to human speech, cannot be dismissed as unreasonable. Do not then confuse that intellect, that surface consciousness which man has trained to be an organ of utility and nothing more, and which therefore can only deal adequately with the given world of sense, with that mysterious something in you, inarticulate, but inextinguishable, by which you, the given world of sense. And then I think she's saying, with that mysterious something in you, inarticulate but inextinguishable, by which you are aware that a greater truth exists. This truth, whose neighborhood you feel and for which you long, is life. You are in it all the while, like a fish in the sea, like a bird in the air, says Saint Mythschild of Hackborn said many centuries ago, as Saint Mechthilde, I don't know how to say it, it's probably German, of Hackborn said many centuries ago, she says, you were in it all the while, and then she quotes, like a fish in the sea, like a bird in the air. I think this is the same Mathilde of Madberg, because I remember that quote in the book that I read that Evelyn Underhill did the preface to. There's the sun setting. I wish I can't zoom in on this side of the camera, and I don't want to chop this video up more. Give yourself then to this divine and infinite life, this mysterious cosmic activity in which you are immersed, of which you are born. Trust it. Let it surge in on you. Cast off, as the mystics are always begging you to do, the fetters of the senses, the remora of desire. And making your interests identical with those of the all, rise to freedom, to that spontaneous, creative, artistic life which, inherent in every individual self, is our share of the life of the universe. You are yourself vital, a free center of energy. Did you but know it? You can move to higher levels, to greater reality, truer self-fulfillment, if you will. Though you be, as Plato said, like an oyster in your shell, you can open that shell to the living waters without, draw from the immortal vitality. Thus only by contact with the real shall you know reality. Cor ad cor loquitur, Loquitur. I wonder if my other version has the Latin written out. All right. The Indian mystics declare substantially the same truth when they say that illusion of finitude is only to be escaped by relapsing into the substantial and universal life, abolishing individuality. So too by a deliberate self-abandonment to that which Plato calls the saving madness of ecstasy. Here, I'll let you see the skaters for a second. The skateboarders are doing tricks over there. My friend's going into the ocean. I can show you in a second. He's far off. All right, Plato calls the saving madness of ecstasy. Did the initiates of Dionysus draw near to God? So their Christian cousins assert that self-surrender is the only way, that they must die to live, must lose to find, that knowing implies being, that the method and secret which they have always practiced consists merely in a meek and loving union, the synthesis of passion and self-sacrifice with that divine and unseparated life, that larger consciousness in which the soul is grounded, and which they hold to be coterminous with God. In their hours of contemplation, they deliberately empty themselves of the false images of the intellect, neglect the cinematograph of sense. Then only are they capable of transcending the merely intellectual levels of consciousness and perceiving that reality which, quote, hath no image. Pilgrimage to the place of the wise, said Jalaluddin. Pilgrimage to the place of the wise, said this guy, is to find escape from the flame of separation. It is the mystic secret in a nutshell. When I stand empty in God's will, and empty of God's will, and of all his works, and of God himself, Meister Eckhart, with his usual violence of language, then am I above all creatures, and am neither God nor creature, but I am what I was and evermore shall be. He attains that is to say, by this escape from a narrow selfhood, not to identity with God, that were only conceivable upon a basis of pantheism, but to an identity with his own substantial life, and through it with the life of a real and living universe in symbolic language, with the, quote, thought of the divine mind, whereby union with that mind, in essence or ground of the soul, becomes possible. The first great message of this vitalistic philosophy, this majestic dream of time and motion, is then seen to be Cease to identify your intellect and yourself, a primary lesson which none who purpose the study of mysticism may neglect. Become at least aware of, if you cannot know, the larger, truer self, that free, creative self which constitutes your life, as distinguished from the scrap of consciousness, which is its servant. How then, asks the small, consciously seeking personality of the normal man, am I to become aware of this, my larger self, and of the free, eternal spiritual life which it lives? Here, philosophy, emerging from the watertight compartment in which metaphysics have lived too long retired, calls in psychology and tells us that in intuition, in a bold reliance on contact between the totality of the self and the external world. A bold reliance on contact between the totality of the self and the external world, perhaps too in those strange states of lucidity which accompany great emotion and defy analysis, lies the normal man's best chance of attaining, as it were, a swift and sidelong knowledge of this real. Smothered in daily life by the fretful activities of our surface mind, reality emerges in our great moments, and seeing ourselves in its radiance, we know for good or evil what we are. We are not pure intellects. Around our conceptual and logical thought, there remains a vague, nebulous somewhat. That's capital somewhat. The substance at whose expense the luminous nucleus we call the intellect is formed. In this aura, this diffuse sensitiveness, we are asked to find man's medium of communication with the universal life. Such partial, dim, and fragmentary perceptions of the real, however, such excursions into the absolute, cannot be looked upon as a satisfaction of man's hunger for truth. He does not want to peep, but to live. Hold on. If I have to cut that out, I'm not going to say anything. Because anyway. Sometimes the platforms make us do that. Somewhat, the substance, remains a vague nebulous somewhat. The substance at whose expense the luminous nucleus we call the intellect is formed. In this aura, this diffuse sensitiveness, we are asked to find man's medium of communication with the universal life. Such partial, dim, and fragmentary perception of the real, however, such excursions into the absolute cannot be looked upon as a satisfaction of man's hunger for truth. He does not want to peep, but to live. Hence, he cannot be satisfied with anything less than a total and permanent adjustment of his being to the greater life of reality. This alone, as Rudolf Eucken, E-U-C-K-E-N, has well pointed out, can resolve the disharmonies between the self and the world and give meaning and value to human life. I'll read what she says. It seems, in her footnotes, it seems as if man could never escape from himself, and yet, when shut into the monotony of his own sphere, he is overwhelmed with a sense of emptiness. The only remedy here is radically to alter the conception of man himself, to distinguish within him the narrower and larger life, the life that is straitened and finite and can never transcend itself, and an infinite life through which he enjoys communion with the immensity and the truth of the universe. Can man rise to this spiritual level? On the possibility of his doing so rests all our hope of supplying any meaning or value to life. That's Der Sinn und Wert des Lebens. Page 81. I don't know who's saying that. Maybe Rudolf Eucken. That's who said that. So the possibility of this adjustment of union between man's life and that independent spiritual life, which is the stuff of reality, is the theme alike of mysticism and of Eucken's spiritual vitalism, or as he prefers to call it, his activistic philosophy. Reality, says Eucken, is an independent spiritual world, unconditioned by the apparent world of sense. To know it and to live it is man's true destiny, his point of contact with it, his personality. Oh, I'm having such a moment. My friend just came over to wave, the woman one. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your presence. It's like you're honoring this moment and listening to this, and I'm honoring it by reading it, and they're honoring it by doing their spiritual practices. And another guy I know here is rollerblading around, getting his exercise in, you know. I still have my skates on. Anyway, okay. Reality, says Yukin, is an independent spiritual world unconditioned by the apparent world of sense. To know it and to live it is man's true destiny. His point of contact with it is personality, the inward fount of his being, his heart, not his head. I just posted a video, if you want to look it up, on essence and personality, and I talked for about 45 minutes on this one sentence that you just said. So if you want to know more there, go look up essence and personality, and the hashtags are Maurice Nicole and Gurdjieff on finding your true identity. Okay, so go back to the book. Man is real and in the deepest sense alive in virtue of this free, personal life principle within him. But he is bound and blinded by the ties set up between his surface intelligence and the sense world. The struggle for reality must be a struggle on man's part to transcend the sense world, escape its bondage. He must renounce it and be reborn to a higher level of consciousness, shifting his center of interest from the natural to the spiritual plane. It's so weird because underneath that video, someone I know had just posted a video the same day as mine, which talks about this. So I linked to her video, which is talking about, she's a southerner from like Atlanta, and she's talking like that, and she's saying you have to disconnect from your senses. Your five senses will pull you, and she's like, you'll be torn out of the screen. You will be torn up, by the enemy of our souls if you just keep going only by your senses. It was like synchronistic. Anyway, I hear the spirit of what she's saying, so it just all makes sense to me. But he must renounce it and be, quote, reborn to a higher level of consciousness, shifting his center of interest from the natural to the spiritual plane. The other place I talk about this is in the book The New Man. I read that whole book, and the whole thing is about shifting your consciousness, being reborn as a new man. But it's just Maurice Nicole's description of it. I don't agree with all of his description of it, but he's trying to, another book that is like describing this one sentence in a whole book, right? He must renounce it and be, quote, reborn to a higher level of consciousness, shifting his center of interest from the natural to the spiritual plane. Just like when Jesus said, when Nicodemus asked him in the night, secretly, he came, what must we do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, you must be born again. And he said, oh, go back into my mother's stomach? How? And he's like, no, you're born of water and you have to be born of the Spirit. It's born anew. Anyway, according to the thoroughness, that's in John chapter 3, St. John was the mystic of all the disciples. According to the thoroughness with which he does this, will be the amount of real life he enjoys. Wow. According to the thoroughness with which he or she does this, will be the amount of real life he or she enjoys. The initial break with the, quote, world, the refusal to spend one's life communing with one's own cinematograph picture is essential if the freedom of the infinite is to be attained. Our life, says Yukin, does not move upon a single level, but upon two levels at once, the natural and the spiritual. This is why on all those pictures you see Jesus doing this. I was taught by a monk in a Greek Orthodox monastery. He said, this is God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Or it can mean other things too, and this is your human nature and your divine nature, And so he's showing the unity, but that is two different things, you're both. The initial break with the world, the refusal to spend one's life communing with one's own cinematograph picture, is essential if the freedom of the infinite is to be attained. Our life, says Eucken, does not move upon a single level, but upon two levels at once, the natural and the spiritual. The key to the puzzle of man lies in the fact that he is, quote, the meeting point of various stages of reality. All his difficulties and triumphs are grounded in this. The whole question for him is, which world shall be central for him, the real, vital, all-embracing life we call spirit, or the lower life of sense? What do you think Jesus meant when he said, seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things shall be added unto you? Matthew 6:33. Okay, and then back to the book. Shall existence, quote, existence with a capital E, the superficial obvious thing, or, quote, substance with a capital S, the underlying verity, truth, be his home or her home? Shall he remain the slave of the senses with their habits and customs, or rise to a plane of consciousness, of heroic endeavor in which, participating in the life of the spirit, he knows reality because he is real? The mystics, one and all, have answered this question in the same sense, and centuries before the birth of activistic philosophy, they have proved in their own experience that its premises are true. This philosophic diagram, this application of the vitalistic idea to the transcendental world, does in fact fit the observed facts of mysticism far more closely even than it fits the observed facts of man's ordinary mental life. The primary break with the sense world, the new birth and development of the spiritual consciousness on high levels, in Eucken's eyes, an essential factor of the attainment of reality. Okay, she says, 1, the primary break from the sense world. 2, the new birth and development of the spiritual consciousness on high levels, in Eucken's eyes, an essential factor in the attainment of reality. And 3, that ever closer and deeper dependence on and appropriation of the fullness of the divine life, the conscious participation in and active union with the infinite and eternal. These 3 imperatives of Eucken's system, as we shall see later, form an exact description of the psychological process through which the mystics pass. If then Eucken be right in pointing to this transcendence as the highest destiny of the race, mysticism becomes the crown of man's ascent towards reality, the orderly completion of the universal plan. The mystics show us this independent spiritual life, this fruition of the absolute, enjoyed with a fullness to which others cannot attain. They are the heroic examples of the life of spirit, just as the great artists, the great discoverers, are the heroic examples of the life of beauty and the life of truth. Directly participating, like all artists, in the divine life, they are always persons of exuberant vitality, but this vitality expresses itself in unusual forms, hard of understanding for ordinary men. Tell me about it. When we see a picture or a poem, hear a musical composition, we accept it as an expression of life, an earnest of the power which brought it forth. But the deep contemplations of the great mystic, his visionary reconstructions of reality, and the fragments of them which he is able to report, do not seem to us as they are the equivalents, or more often the superiors of the artistic and scientific achievements of other great men and women. She's talking about mankind. Mysticism then offers us the history, as old as civilization, of a race of adventurers who have carried to its term the process of a deliberate and active return to the divine fount of things, have surrendered themselves indeed to the life movement of the universe, hence have lived with an intenser life than other men can ever know. They have transcended the sense world and lived on high levels the spiritual life. Therefore, they are types of all that our latent spiritual consciousness, which shows itself in the hunger for the absolute, can be made to mean to us if we develop it, and have in this respect a unique importance for the race. It is the mystics, too, who have perfected that method of intuition, that knowledge by union, the existence of which philosophy has been driven to acknowledge, but where the metaphysician obtains at best a sidelong glance at that being, quote, unchanging yet elusive, end quote, whom he has so often defined but never discovered. The artists, a brief and dazzling vision of the beauty which is truth, they gaze with confidence into the very eyes of the beloved. The mystics again declare themselves to know the divinely real, free, and active, quote, world of becoming, end quote, which vitalistic philosophy expounds to us. They are, by their very constitution, acutely conscious of the divine immanence and its unresting travail. It is in them, and they are in it. Or, as they put it, in their blunt theological way, the Spirit of God is within you. But they are not satisfied with this statement and this knowledge, and here it is that they part company with the vitalists. It is, they think, but half a truth. To know reality in this way, to know it in its dynamic aspect, enter into the great life of the all, this is indeed, in the last resort, to know it supremely from the point of view of man, to liberate from selfhood the human consciousness. But it is not to know it from the point of view of God. There are planes of being, there are planes of being beyond this, countries dark to the intellect, deeps in which only the very greatest contemplatives have looked. These, coming forth, have declared with Rusybrook that God, according to the persons, is eternal work, but according to the essence and its perpetual stillness, he is eternal rest. I've seen that. I've seen that in visions. The full spiritual consciousness of the true mystic is developed not in one, but in two apparently opposite, but really complementary directions. And there's something, lo vidi ambo la corte diel ciel manifeste. On the one hand, he is intensely aware of and known himself to be at one with that active world of becoming, that deep and primal life of the all, from which his own life takes its rise. Hence, though he has broken forever with the bondage of the senses, he perceives in every manifestation of life a sacramental meaning, a loveliness, a wonder, a heightened significance, which is hidden from other men. He may with Saint Francis, today is Saint Francis's feast day, he may with Saint Francis call the sun and the moon, water and fire, his brothers and his sisters, or receive with Blake the messages of the trees. Because of his cultivation of disinterested love, because his outlook is not conditioned by the, quote, exclusive action of the will to live, but he has attained the power of communion with the living reality of the universe, and in this respect can truly say that he finds God in all and all in God. Thus the skilled spiritual vision of Lady Julian of Norwich, transcending the limitations of human perception, entering into harmony with a larger world whose rhythms cannot be received by common men, saw the all-enfolding divine life, the mesh of reality. Quote, for as the body is clad in the cloth, she said, and the flesh in the skin, and the bones in the flesh, and the heart in the whole, so are we, soul and body, clad in the goodness of God and enclosed. Yea, and more homely, for all these may waste and wear away, but the goodness of God is ever whole. Many mystical poets and pantheistic mystics never pass beyond this degree of lucidity. All right, I'm going to end there. That was from Revelations of Divine Love. That's free online as well. Because I keep this to an hour so people can set aside an hour to listen. All right, I wish you so much love, peace and love. Share this with others who are interested in this or you think may be interested in this. It grows my channel because when I put these on my channel, the algorithms get on YouTube, the algorithms get all mixed up because they don't understand, but I don't mind. I'm not doing it for those. I'm doing it because this needs to be out in the world. I feel it. I wish you so much love.